Is there a healing path to joy and peace no matter what life brings? You'll definitely want to listen to this very, very touching and very wise interview with Kimberly Harms to find out just how Kim was able to pull herself out of the depths of despair after the suicide of her son, the suicide of her mother, and the death of her husband. You'll also want to know how Kim's son reached out from the other side and how Kim talks about how we can prepare our children for emotional success after we die. She talks about how to overcome grief and challenges and the legacy you leave. Come join us. Blessings.
Hi there, and welcome to the Grief and Rebirth podcast. I'm your host, author and trauma survivor Irene Weinberg, here to encourage you wherever you are in your healing journey. In each episode, I chat with incredible grief and trauma specialists, healers, mediums, and celebs, as well as remarkable people who have inspiring healing stories to share. If you're looking for a podcast that's both uplifting and inspiring, you've found it. Let us help you find your joy in life.
Hi, everyone. I'm speaking to you today from my studio in West Orange, New Jersey, and I could not be more delighted to have the pleasure of interviewing Dr. Kimberly Harms, whose many life roles have included serving as a commissioned officer in the United States Public Health Service, a dental school professor, a civil mediator, a clinical dentist, a school board chair, the president of an international women's organization, the first woman president of the Minnesota Dental Association, and a national spokesperson for the American Dental Association. In addition to her impressive roles in dentistry, Kim is also a death doula, a grief counselor, an award-winning best-selling author, and an international speaker on the topics of grief, conflict, and legacy planning. She has been featured on CBS, BBC, CNN, ABC, Fox News, Today, and NPR, and her latest book, titled Are You Ready? How to Build a Legacy to Die For, recently won the 2024 Pacific Book Awards for Best Inspirational Book. Few have faced pain and suffering like Kim has. Having suffered the deaths by suicide of her mother and son, and the death by broken heart of her husband after their son's death, Kim knows from personal experience that it is possible to prepare for a healing path to joy and peace no matter what life brings. Kim uses her heartbreaking story to help others with the wisdom she has gained through tragedy. She now considers her most important role in life to be mother to her 2 surviving children and grandmother to her 6 precious grandchildren. I'm looking forward to asking Kim, who will be speaking to us from Bloomington, Minnesota, about her heartbreaking personal losses, how she pulled herself out of her pit of despair, the tasks of mourning, the importance of overcoming grief and challenges in our lives to leave a legacy of joy and resilience, why healing is not a passive event, and so much more for what is sure to be a profoundly touching, inspiring, and wisdom-filled interview. Hi, Kim. A warm, heartfelt welcome to Grief and Rebirth podcast.
Thank you so much for having me, Irene. It's just such a privilege to be here.
Thank you. I feel the same way about having you here. Really, you're amazing. Your story's amazing, and you're such a wonderful role model. So let's start from the beginning and have people understand where you started and to where you are now. So you learned about loss, challenge, and grief at an early age. Could you please describe the physical issues you were born with and your relationship with each of your parents?
Well, when I was born missing some fingers on my right hand, and then I also had some spinal abnormalities. And it was hard for my parents. It was hard for my mother, especially. She was a hand model, so that, they had some symbolic there, something symbolic there, because obviously I wasn't going to be one of those. But she was a wonderful mother. My mother was fabulous. She suffered from bipolar disease, but she was a fabulous mother. So mental illness does not disqualify you from being a good parent, because she couldn't have been any better. My father, on the other hand, was brilliant. He was a rocket scientist, basically. He designed
Wow.
missiles, Pentagon. He was brilliant, but not so brilliant in the relationship category. And when I was 3, my parents divorced. And when I was 6, when my parents divorced, we lived with my mother and my grandmother, and those were very happy years. But when I was 6, my father had just discovered that there was a drug out that my mother had taken. It was being tested in the United States in Cincinnati, Ohio. She just happened to be passing through across country. We were going out to California. She was suffering from car sickness and morning sickness. And a friend of hers had someone who was testing this new drug for morning sickness called thalidomide. And so she took some tablets at that time. And of course, in the early 60s, they discovered that thalidomide had caused the loss of arms and legs and limbs and fingers and all, many, many birth defects all over Europe. And I think also in Australia, where it had been on the market. There are still some survivors here in the US, but not very many, because it was never accepted by the FDA. So that was a good thing for the United States. But my mother at the time, she was emotionally fragile to begin with. That was enough to kind of send her over the edge. And she went into an institution, was committed. And my father came out and got us and brought us home to his wife, his brand new wife, who before they got married, he forgot to tell him that he had kids. Just, let that out, a little detail.
Oh my God.
Little idea. I forgot to tell her. But then when they got married and she found out that he did have kids, he said, "Oh, don't worry. You'll never have to take care of them." And well, my mother. And so you can imagine, here she is pregnant with her first child, and Dad drops the 3 of us off at her doorstep and then goes back on ship, because he was in the Navy, goes back to command a ship. So you don't really have to imagine too much to know that was not a good situation. And we lived in very difficult circumstances growing up. So we
She
didn't have
resented you. She resented you with
Absolutely.
everything inside of her.
everything. And it was a very difficult thing. And there was such a difference, because my mother, again, that wonderful mother, one thing she showed us in 6 short years, because I was 6, in 6 short years, she gave us enough love to last a lifetime. She truly did. And now there's all kinds of new attachment theories out there that basically say that the love and care you get in those first years is absolutely critical to your future happiness and your future relationships. Because happiness, research shows, is based on relationships. So
Right.
that is such a critical piece. And so I think that my ability to survive what I have is based upon those 6 years with my mother.
Wow.
Unfortunately, when I was 17, Mom's bipolar disease got the best of her, and she took her own life and passed away. And that, of course, was a very, very difficult time for my sister and brother and I. But we kind of got through that. It was very, very hard. I suffered a lot of depression at that time too. I was also suicidal myself. I know what it's like to be in that pit and want to, just say it's going to be easier to be gone than to be here. So I understood where she had been. So I think that probably helped me at least understand my mother. Well, life kind of went on and things got better. And I went to the University of Maryland. In my first week, I met this really cute guy named Jim Harms. And he wanted to go to dental school. And of course, I was taking courses in biology because I was going to be a psychiatrist and save my mother. But then she was gone. So I had no purpose at that point, those first couple of months. So I thought, hey, dental school. I'm taking all the right classes, and maybe this was the 70s. Maybe if I went to dental school and had a good job, Jim would marry me.
Woohoo.
He did. So the plan worked. I had to get over, were they going to accept me with 7 fingers? They did. But the plan worked. And we did get married, and we went to dental school together. We were in the commissioned officers in the public health service together. And then we opened up a practice together, and we had 3 absolutely amazing children, and life was good again. But then later on in 2007, in 2004, I lost my nephew to suicide. So there's another suicide in the family. He also was very, very brilliant young man who jumped off, was doing his doctorate thesis. I think apparently missed it somehow. I think maybe a little alcohol was involved. And he jumped off the highest building he could find in Tokyo. And that was just devastating to our family. A couple years later, my brother died of a heart attack at 56. And a month later, my husband, Jim, was diagnosed with liver cancer. And I don't know, most people, when you have cancer, you get online, you start looking for what are the chances, right? And everything kept saying he has less than a 5% chance of living for 5 years. And so that was my first, experience with thinking, oh my gosh, I'm going to be a widow. What's going on here? But fortunately, he got a liver transplant. That was a miracle.
Wow, that
It's
is a
not
miracle.
later. It's a miracle because it very difficult to get in so quickly. And we thought, okay, we sold half of our dental practice because I couldn't manage it all by myself, and Jim was going to be practicing just part-time. But then in 2009, on January 31st of 2009, our lives just exploded when our son, Eric, was a freshman at Columbia, brilliant, wonderful kid. He was kind of got the rocket scientist brain, but he also got a big heart. And he had been recruited by Columbia. He was studying engineering, but he was a brilliant jazz pianist as well. So
Wow.
that's why Columbia was so good for him, because he could be in the engineering program and play in the jazz program. So he was living the dream. He was doing both of those things. And he even got elected to student government at Columbia. Like, what the heck?
Wow. Wow.
He plays with the students from Barnard. So, I mean, really, his whole life was just going great. He came home for the first semester, was absolutely on top of the world, had made the dean's list in engineering. He was so happy. And he went back, and 2 weeks later, 45 minutes after a breakup with his girlfriend, the final breakup, he took his life as well.
Oh my gosh.
That impulsive brain, and our lives shattered into a million pieces. And at that point in time, I didn't think I'd ever experience joy again. I was at the bottom of that pit with just, trying to
Oh
sniffle
my God. Oh
from
my
the blood,
God. Oh my
how that
God.
is,
Oh my
right? You
God.
just can't see anything. And I think the rest of the story really is that I was able to find joy again, and I live a very joyful life now.
That's beautiful. Well, before we get to all of that, there are two spiritual things that happened in your life that I really want to touch on for our audience. I know that your son Eric had an experience seeing an angel during an accident when he was 8 years old. And I also know that after he passed, the phone rang and you heard his voice and there were other visions. So can you talk about all of that? Because that's so amazing that
Yes.
those things happened to you.
Interestingly enough, Eric, when he was younger, thought that he was not going to have a long life, which was interesting.
Premonition.
Premonition of that. But when he was 8 years old, my husband was involved. He was in the car, and he was involved in a car accident in our small town of Farmington, Minnesota. And two boys were killed.
Ugh.
Luckily for Jim, it was a 17-year-old driver. He was driving on slippery roads. There were turns. He was going too fast. And, Jim could not have done anything to prevent it. And there were witnesses for that. So that was good for him, at least for his healing, because it was a horrible experience for him. But during the accident, Eric woke up. He'd been sleeping in the car, and he woke up from the accident, and he said he saw an angel sitting next to him. But he said, Mom, it didn't really look like an angel, but it was an angel. I said, well, how do you know? He says, well, it was a man, and he was a little portly. And, most of the angels that you think of as when you're 8 years old are beautiful women, singing with beautiful voices. But no, this was a kind of an ordinary looking man. And he said, and Mom, he didn't talk to me with his voice. He talked to me with his mind, and so I thought, oh, well, okay then, 8-year-old. And he said, your dad is not dead. He's sleeping. You need to wake him up and get him out of the car because it's dangerous in here.
Wow.
So the first thing that Jim remembers is Eric saying, Dad, we have to get out of the car. It's dangerous in here, which are the words that he said the angel said. And then later, after the accident, he was telling a psychologist this because we wanted to get him some help after this experience. The psychologist asked him, well, where did you see the angel last? And he said, well, the people that were around kind of had taken Eric out of the car and gotten him off to the side of the road. And Jim went to try to help the boys that were in the car, and it had pulled them out and they were dead. And Jim had realized that these boys were dead, and he was standing over their bodies crying. There was another man who was in a truck behind him also standing over the bodies and also crying. And Eric said, the angel was standing between Dad and that other man and had his arms around them.
Oh
And I get
my.
goosebumps. I mean, I get
Oh
goosebumps right
my.
now. This is a little 8-year-old. I get
Oh
goosebumps right
my.
now when I even say that story, because none of that imagery is anything that he had any previous exposure to. And it really, gave us, gave me that understanding that we're a part of a much bigger world. The world that we see is not the full world. And that becomes a big part when you're grieving, of trying to understand where you are in the universe, kind of, and what your place is. And this is just part of it. So that was the first one. And then after he died, and I was really seriously, I was in the bottom of that grief pit. I didn't think I could live one more day. I just couldn't understand how this could happen. And so my husband and my two daughters had very vivid dreams of Eric coming and talking with them, and giving them kind of advice and things that they had not heard, and wearing clothing that they had never seen, because one was off in college, one was and one was in law school. And it was just phenomenal. Those dreams gave them so much comfort. And then my husband had a vivid dream about Eric, going off to another place that he could not follow. And so that was an interesting dream. And I was feeling a little left out because I didn't quite get the dreams that the rest of my family had gotten. But one night, as I was just kind of waking up, all of a sudden I had this very, very, very vivid vision of the phone ringing, and the phone ring, and I picked up the phone, and on the other side was Eric's voice. And if you're, as a mother, you can tell how your child is feeling from that first syllable. So I got to the phone, and all I heard was, "Hi, Mom." And I was like, Eric, where are you? But that's all I heard. I woke up, that's all I heard. And that gave me such peace. It kind of, the understanding that he's okay, he's okay, he's okay. And as a grieving mother, especially when suicide is concerned, especially when religious beliefs about suicide and whether you can go to heaven or not, are kind of heavily part of my past thinking. It was very, very hard. And as a mother, I kind of thought, God, I'm a Christian, so I believe, Jesus gave up his life for our sins and for us, right? So I said, okay, God, you had this deal with your son where he went, gave up his life for our sins. So let me do that for Eric. So if this suicide has caused any, problem with him getting to the good place, I'll take his place, and I'll go through whatever I need to go through. I'll take his place. But I had other experiences later on that God assured me that was not going to be necessary, that he was in a good place.
And people who listen to this podcast, I have interviewed many people who have unfortunately lost children to suicide, or other people or spouses to suicide. And they have all communicated with mediums, and they come through from the other side. They're fine. Yeah. They're fine. So, that's very reassuring. There's no judgment there.
Right.
Right.
And he had those 3 experiences with young people from 3 different parts of the country, including one of my nieces, who came up to me at 3 different times and said, I had this vivid dream. Eric came back to me. He used to do this jig. He was kind of like a Robin Williams character. He was very jovial. He used to do a jig. And they said, he's fine. He's okay. It was an accident. He's so sorry. And that, hearing it 3 different times from 3 different people, the exact same vision, gave me peace. Of course, and I was thinking, how come I didn't get that vision? But that's okay. I'm gonna, we'll have a talk with whoever is in charge. We'll talk about that later on. But
I can relate to that.
Mother, give me some of this. Right. But it was wonderful, and it just, again, gave me the peace that I needed when I needed it.
It's beautiful. And then there was something else beautiful that happened to you, because here you're in the pit of despair, and you meet this guy named Carl, who was also a pit of despair dweller. And he inspired a life-saving change of attitude within you. Could you tell us that story?
It was phenomenal. It was phenomenal. I was coming out of my dental office maybe a month or two, a little while after Eric died. And I was in the zombie phase. I mean, anyone that's been through a very depressing thing, you're like dead on the inside, but you're trying to work, and you're trying to, trying to look like a human being on the outside, but you're really dead on the inside. And I was coming out of the office, and I saw Jim and his cousin engage in this very, very serious discussion. And when he saw me, when Carl saw me, he came up to me with his finger wagging in my face. And, I was a grieving mother, so I'm not used to this. People were pretty nice to me, right? He came up, and he had so much energy and pain and anger. And he came up, and in my face, he said, "Don't you ever let your remaining children feel that they are not enough. Don't you do that to them." And it was like a lightning bolt hit me, because he had lost his brother at about the same age, about Eric's age. And he felt that he lost his parents at the same time. He felt that his parents couldn't focus on their living children because they were overcome with grief for their dead one. And that divide lasted his whole life. And
Wow, how sad.
yes. And so at that moment, I mean, I love my daughters, I love my husband. And at that moment, I realized that the grief wasn't just mine. The grief that I had and was showing was everybody around me, including my children. And so I just became determined at that moment to fight my way out of the pit. And it's a long, hard battle and it takes a long time. But eventually I've been able to breathe the fresh air and find joy in life from the fight, claw, kick. And you go up and then you come down and you go up a little more and you come down.
Oh, I can relate totally.
But I was just so fortunate that he said that to me, that he shared that with me, that he shared his pain with me. And I think we need to remember sometimes that people need to hear that they're not alone.
So true. And when you talk about also, I know that there's a psychologist, J. William Worden, that you talk about, who's provided a framework because you went through all this, for the 4 tasks of mourning that help us understand how people journey through grief. So could you help us learn the difference between grief and mourning and describe his 4 tasks of mourning?
Yes, I was, after Eric died, a year after Eric died, I lost my ability to practice dentistry too. So I lost my identity as a dentist too, which was a big deal for me. And so I had time on my hands, so I became a grief counselor. And as I was studying, I found, obviously Kubler-Ross's stages of grief, which we all are familiar with. And grief is kind of that grief that you feel right after something happens. Mourning is a process because it's a processing. We don't think about it as processing, but it's a process. And I loved and I latched on to Worden's tasks of mourning because I like tasks better than stages. Stages feel like you just kind of go
And it
through.
gives you purpose, like you have a direction, right?
Right. And tasks are like, you got to do it. This is work. You can't just sit there and expect everything's going to get better. And so the first task was accepting the loss. And I remember how long it took just to accept that I was no longer a mother of a son. Took a long time. The second task is to go through the process of grieving. And that is the hard part that sometimes takes years. It took me years. I mean, it takes years and everyone's different. Everyone processes it different. And we need to respect the fact that everybody processes it differently. And then the third step was to accept the new reality. Like, okay, this is my new reality. I no longer have a son. I'm not the mother of 3 anymore. I'm the mother of 2. So I have to now refocus that. And then the fourth part, and the part that I like because it's a goal to establish, and I have reached that goal, where you can keep the memory of your child, your son, my husband, my son, my mother, keep that memory deep within you. Don't forget, your grief is there. You have that tender spot, but be able to look up and live your life without that shroud of grief covering you up and affecting everything you do. So live your life with purpose and joy. And again, I wish I could just click my heels and have that happen overnight. It doesn't. That processing of the grief is like the critical part. It takes time. But I think it's important for people to know because before Carl, gave me the calling, I thought I'd be in that pit forever. In fact, I thought, you know what? Why fight the pit? Because you fight the pit and you're just going to get thrown down in here again. So why even, oh, my life is terrible. I want to just stay under the bed for the next, 20 years. It really allows us to kind of understand you can get there, but you got to work for it.
Got to work for it. You're also, when you're working for it, you're also role modeling for other people. You're role modeling for your daughters because I felt that way about my son because there's no guarantees in their lives either. So it's really inspiring for them if they can see you moving through. Would you agree? And healing and coming to the other side of it helps them in their lives also.
I think one of the most important legacies, because I talk about legacy, that we can leave is resilience. We need to leave. I talk to my children. I talk to and of course, everyone's different when you talk about death and dying, because I got one that says, yeah, mom, where's everything? Let's go. Let's check this list off and get this. They're both attorneys, but one of them is like that. The second was like, yeah, I know, mom. I know. Okay. I know. Thank you, mom. Thank you, mom. But I don't even want to think that you're going to die. So everyone's a little different, but it's important to talk to them. And I've talked to all my grandchildren and I talk about their Papa, Angel Pop. I call him Angel Pop Pop. At Christmas, we get presents from me and Angel Pop Pop. I keep him alive. But I also let them know, one day I'm going to be gone and I want you to go and thrive and have a great life. And I know that it works because a few months ago, my little Heidi, she was, I think 8 at the time, was at the kitchen table and she looked up at me and she said, Nana, I said, yeah, Heidi. She goes, if what happened to Pop happened to you. And then she stopped and I said, you mean if I were to die? And she said, yeah, Nana, if you were to die. And I said, look, okay, go ahead, Heidi, go ahead. And she goes, well, Nana, if you were to die, we still go to Disney World. And I said, yes, yes. In fact, I'm going to put a clause in my will that puts money aside for the whole family to go on a big after I go to live joyfully after I'm gone. But I don't know if I'm going to tell them all that because I don't want them to look forward to my passing. I think the one might know a little bit, but after I'm gone, I want them to go and have a good time. But I felt it was like success because she understood that I'm going to be gone, but I want her to be happy and I'm going to give her everything I can while I'm still here. They need to know that, right? They need to know that we're going to go at some point.
Absolutely. I talk about it all the time with my son, my grandchildren, and all of that kind of thing. Absolutely. And I want you to also tell everyone you think that there's more to the 4 tasks of mourning, that they should be 7 tasks of mourning from
Yes.
your experience. So I'm sure we have a lot of eager listeners here to say,
My
oh,
7
really?
tasks,
There's
right?
more
Yeah.
to do? Oh, tell us about
There's
that.
there's more. So I was writing a book for widows. I work with the widows ministry. And the other that I tried to divide it into chapters with the tasks because I just love those tasks. And the first task I think is vanquishing fear. I have to tell you that I no longer live in fear and it's a great place to live, but fear tends to just take us and hold us when we're grieving. Then conquering loneliness, especially as a widow. I mean, I was married to Jim.
Wow, I can relate.
Right. 44 years. I had somebody there. Somebody knew if I went to the store, she's at the store. Now I go and nobody knows where I am. I wake up in the morning, there's nobody there. I start to kind of feel that loneliness that I've never felt before being alone. Updating your identity, again, as a widow, as a mother, but especially my most recent one was as a widow. Who am I now? I was part of a couple. Now I'm single. What is my identity now? What am I supposed to do? You have to update that. Uh, and embracing peace, because when you live in fear, your soul is in a very rotten place. It's kind of physically uncomfortable when you have grief, right? And
Absolutely.
finding and embracing, right, embracing that peace, to get that peace in your soul, to get the peace in your heart, to be able to live with peace. Then you can sleep at night, because if you don't have peace, you're going to be up all night. I have sleep issues anyway because I'm old, but when you're up at night and that ticker tape keeps going. So I had to learn to embrace peace and search for purpose. And if you would have asked me what I was going to be doing at this time 20 years ago, it would be completely different. I was supposed to retire. We built a beautiful lake home for our retirement. Jim and I were going to retire, but it's too far away for me to go by myself, and it's too big for me to go by myself. So we had to, it was going to be our legacy for the generations of our family. We're going to have this home, and they were going to thank us for this beautiful home, right? Well, I sold it last year because the kids didn't want my beautiful home. I had to find a new purpose. I had to change everything I was doing. So I've changed my purpose. I'm writing now. I never would have thought I was writing before. Discovering joy, huge. Joy, living in joy, right? Living in joy. Wow, it's a great place to live. And it's great for the people around you because it's catching. You spread that joy when you're just like you spread the sadness, you also can spread joy. So discovering joy is great. And now we're coming close to the holidays. And
Yeah, talk to us about that.
yes, so we need to unwrap hope for the holidays. We have to kind of re-identify the holidays in our mind, because the holidays for me were all wrapped up with my husband, 44 years wrapped up with my husband, and we would have certain traditions that we would do. And we've been developing over the last couple of years new traditions. We still, like I said, with the Christmas presents, it's Nana and Angel Pop. So we remember the family, but we have different traditions. We're embracing different traditions, and we're learning to find joy in new things. And it's hard. Holidays are difficult because they bring back so many wonderful memories. And so I kind of try to focus on creating new wonderful memories, creating the memories now, because as you know, when you get older, they're just going to be memories in a few years. I mean, you have an idea about how these pieces of time are so precious. So I try to make this piece of time precious and that piece of time precious. And I do that, luckily I have some grandchildren and I have children. But even if you don't have children or grandchildren, anybody in your life, at work, at the office, at your friends, make your life joyful, especially around the holidays with new traditions and new beginnings.
And if things come your way and they're unfamiliar with you, my attitude is embrace them. Embrace them. They add to your life. And sometimes it's good to kind of step out of that box where
Yes.
you've been, right?
Right, exactly.
Now, exactly right. But speaking about a box, I know you've struggled with bouts of depression in your life. Oh my God. So I know that you used a combination of medication and psychotherapy to help you. Can you talk about that? And what else would you like to share with our audience about managing? That's a very challenging mental health issue. And obviously it ran through your family because suicide has been a part of that too.
Yes, I'm in the middle. I was in my mother and my son, like who, and first of all, you got to get rid of the shame and the false guilt. I mean, that's a huge thing because I was like, I felt guilty for what did I do that I'm in the middle of this, was my hand the cause? Was it, did I not, I didn't provide resilience to my son so that he could get over a breakup. What did I do? And you start out with the death so many times, you get the shame and guilt. So you got to get rid of that. But after I had been treated before, and I had been suicidal when I was younger, right about Eric's age. So it does run in the family. There's a very strong history. So we have to face that, look at that, and face it just like if you have a history of heart disease and do whatever you can to prevent that.
Absolutely.
Right? You got to look at that. And so after Eric died, I sought treatment for depression, and I've been treated both ways with therapy, and also with medication. And I have to say, I'm so grateful because it works. And I'm on medication. I try to get off it, because you think, well, I'm feeling better now. I don't, I'm a baby boomer. I don't need medication. I can do it on my own now, right? Well, I got off it and and you go through like a little withdrawal period, and so when I got through all that, I was just thinking I was going to be strong and I was going to be tough and I was going to do it. And finally, my daughter said, "Mom, are you taking your medication?" You kind of feel a little patronized when they do that. I have to say, my first reaction was, "What? What are you talking about?" She could tell the difference. And I thought, well, no. She goes, why did you get off it, Mom? I said, well, I just felt that I didn't need, Mom,
Go back, Mom.
I think you need it. And then I went to my doctor and I said, well, I kind of got, she said, why did you do that? And I said, well, I just thought I needed to be off it. And she said, was it helping? I go, yes. Were there side effects? Well, no, I did. I happened not to have any. Well, are you going to get off your blood pressure medicine too and have a stroke? I said, well, no, because that's my blood pressure. He goes, well, it's the same thing. It's the same thing. It's a physical thing. Get back on your medication. And so I, at that point, realized I was going to be on it for life. And you know what? It works. It works. And I'm so grateful that we have that because, 100 years ago, people had to
You didn't
just
have
suffer
it.
through.
But not only on that, you're getting the help with the medication, and then the psychotherapy helps you to process your life and deal with your life. So it's right.
Yeah, win-win.
It's a win-win. It
And,
really is.
and my husband didn't. My husband, because he was a strong Norwegian farmer, baby boomer guy, I don't need anything to help me, And right before his transplant, for his liver transplant, his heart had to check out as in good shape because they wouldn't give you a liver if your heart was bad, right? And within a year or so after my son died, he needed quadruple bypass surgery and a valve replacement. So in like a year and a half, his heart just fell apart, which I think was much of it was due to the grief that he couldn't take care of himself and because he
Right.
wasn't getting some help.
Because
So
he couldn't go into that office and really spill his feelings and get those emotions out and talk to somebody.
right.
Yeah.
So if you're suffering, please get help, not just for you, but for the people around you and for your physical health as well, because it can have very damaging effects on your physical health.
Right. And we have to stop looking at mental illness as a stigma.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
Right. So I want to also ask you, after the death of your son, Eric, you were called to Rwanda. Why Rwanda? And you co-found memorial libraries in his name. I mean, it sounds like a wonderful legacy, but what's that about? Rwanda.
You know, you've had experience with divine intervention where you have had messages sent to you. I have not had any messages sent to me, but things happen to me that I think are divine intervention, but they just are not direct messages. And about a month or so after Eric's death, I was at a prayer breakfast and I was sitting next to a woman and she was from Rwanda. And so she started talking about her family. And she was talking about her old family, her two
Mhm.
daughters and husband that were killed in
Oh,
the genocide. She was talking about how they had been murdered. And then she talked about her new family of orphans from the genocide that she had adopted and her new husband that lost his entire family. And she had this
wow.
joyful look in her face. And I thought, what? How? Because I was still zombie. I was a zombie Kim, what? How can you even have this? You could feel the joy emanating from her. And then a couple of weeks later, was given the book Left to Tell by Immaculée Ilibigazi, which is a fabulous book about her survival in a bathroom with 8 other women while the killers were all around them, and how she came to New York, worked for the United Nations, and then wrote this book. It was a fabulous, fabulous book. So here's another Rwandan story. And then a couple of months later, I was having breakfast with one of my very dear friends who happened to be, just happened, to be on the board,
Just coincidentally.
happened with all these other things to be on the board of Books for Africa. And she had been in Rwanda before the genocide and said, I always wanted to bring books there. Let's do a memorial library for Eric. And I said, oh, that would be fabulous. So we started the process and we used a lot of the money from Eric's tuition because we couldn't benefit from the fact that he was dead. We had that money was like, okay, that was put aside for tuition. We need to use it for something. So we started out with that. And we sent 20,000 books to Rwanda. And the first ones were 7 libraries, including the dental school. So I connected with the dental school. So I've been kind of working with them all these years. And so I made these wonderful relationships at the dental school. We had a law library, nursery library, high school, university, 7 of them. But I met these widows in Rwanda, and this is just the most amazing story. When they learned that I was there because I lost my son, I was suddenly part of the pack. They surrounded me with love. It was one of the most amazing feelings I've ever felt because I thought, you guys have lost so much. I've lost one child, and yet you are feeling my pain. You are comforting me in my pain. And I know it's a great comfort because I know what you've been through. And the story, real quick one, was that after the genocide, the Tutsi women who were the victims, their families were killed, and the Hutu women were in this village, and most of the men were gone because either they were dead or they were in jail. So they both considered themselves widows. And the Tutsi women got help from a priest at a local church, and they said, he started these weekly meetings to try to help them kind of get back on track. Well, the Hutu women said, we're kind of widows too. Our husbands are in jail. We need help too. And this wise man said, I'll help you as well, but I'm not going to do it separately. You have to come together and I'll help you together. And they talked about how the first few meetings, they were like the Hutus were on one side, the Tutsi were on the other. They wouldn't talk to each other. They would just this big line between them. And over time, they began to understand that they had so much more in common than they had between them, even though one side, the husbands on one side killed the husbands on the other. Like, what, you just can't imagine. I can't even imagine how they could overcome this. But eventually they formed a cooperative together, and we were meeting with this cooperative, and they work together and they share the profits of what they work on. And many of the Tutsi women have kind of been adopted into the Hutu family so that when they have celebrations and so on, they become part of the family. And I saw that there, the sharing of families. But can you imagine, how do you forgive a genocide? How do you reconcile with the people that were trying to kill you? How do you do that? And again,
Sounds like that could be applied to other parts of the world also.
yes, like us. I mean, the US could use a little bit of that right now,
Right.
And we talk about divine intervention of some sort, however you see it, but they also talked about divine intervention and helping them realize that this was important to love each other and take care of each other. And it is the most amazing story because they did it because they didn't want their children to live through what they lived through. And now they have created, after 30 years, a safe, productive country. It's one of the safest places in Africa. So, you
That's
know, it's
wonderful.
amazing. So look up Rwanda. Of all your listeners
Oh
out
my
there, look up
goodness.
the story of
But there's a
Rwanda.
theme in there about legacy, and these women were also concerned about their legacy for their children and all. So that leads me to ask you about your award-winning book. Are you ready? How to Build a Legacy to Die For, which is your self-help guide about death and living legacies that advocates for important emotional legacies that can be left. So
Yes.
I know there's so much you can tell us, you're going to tell us about your book, including your Death Preppers emotional life insurance plan, and let it rip. Kim, tell us
Rip,
all
let it
about
rip,
it.
let it rip. Well, we talk about legacies, and of course, the Rwandans left a legacy of peace for the next generations. That's just one example of a big legacy. But your legacy is every interaction you have with every person. You don't have to win a Nobel Prize to have a legacy. It's everything you do to show love to your family. And of course, the most important legacy you can ever leave is love. My mother left a legacy of love in 6 short years that lasted my lifetime, and I'm so grateful for that legacy. And I'm trying to pass that legacy of love on to my children and grandchildren, hopefully everybody that I meet, because that's so we need to get that most important one. But there are many, many legacies: education, peace, of faith. All these things could be your legacy, thousands of legacies.
Absolutely.
So the first part of the book talks about just normal people with very unusual legacies and some amazing people. The second part of the book talks about death and dying, because we don't like to talk about death and dying. And all of us probably on your podcast have a number of views of what's going to happen to them after they go, depending on what your religious beliefs are, your faith are. So I talk about that, like what these are the things people believe, and we need to respect each other for what our beliefs are. And then the second part, and is death a grim or a gentle reaper? I really am not afraid of death. You mentioned you were not either. I feel it's a very gentle reaper. I mean, maybe the circumstances might be grim. Car accident is a difficult thing, but the actual death process, I think, is a very gentle thing.
Especially if you know that you're going to go on.
Yes,
So
yes.
that leads into our world about,
Yes.
so what are you doing with that legacy till you get there?
Right, right, exactly. So we're trying to leave as much legacy as we possibly can. And, we kind of live in a culture where it almost sounds like if you eat the right foods and you exercise, you're going to live forever. And you're not. We're going to all go. But the longer you live, the more legacy you can live. So like, I don't want to go right now. If I go right now, I'm ready, because I'm ready to go. But I want to live a long time for my grandchildren, because I want to leave a legacy to them. So that legacy portion is really important. And then the last part of the book is basically after my husband died, when I kind of went, oh my gosh, what do I do now? And I'm in this place between menopause and death. I'm like, what the heck? What kind of a life is this? And everything, I have a new hip, things are, the words stick in my brain. I'm going through the aging process. And I thought, well, so what do I do now? Where's the instruction guide for how to do this? And I couldn't really find one. But one of the things that I did see is that people that didn't get everything prepared before they went many times left a legacy of conflict in their family. Because I think every one of us at a certain age knows of people whose parents died and they didn't have their will put together, and then the family got into big fights with each other and nobody talked to each other. And so when you look at happiness, so many studies show that happiness is the best predictor is strong relationships. And so we all want to leave a legacy of strong relationships to our children and our grandchildren. And one of the best ways you can do that is get your will prepared, get your healthcare directive so they know what to do when you die. They're not going to argue that they should have died in a hospital when you did hospice, or they should have done hospice when you did hospital. You make that decision so nobody else has a say in it. Leave your legacies, get all your stuff together, your passwords, so that when my family now, because I got this stuff in order because I had to, because I wrote the book, so I had some good motivation. So I got mine together. I have it all in a binder and page protectors, including my social security card, the titles to my car, everything they're going to need to process my estate is in one 3-ring binder. So instead of, when I die, my children going through all my drawers trying to find the papers, and my husband's filing cabinet were plastic bags that looked like garbage bags, actually. So you had to know which ones were, so some of us do not have good filing systems where we're just looking through all this stuff to try to figure out where everything is. I also recommend cleaning up your mess so there's not much mess left. Get just rid of your stuff that they don't want. But when I die, my kids will open up this legacy binder, and everything they need is going to be in there. If it's not in there, there's directions where to find it. Like my daughter has my will in her safe, so that they know where that is. And so my dream is they're going to look through that and go, oh, mom loved us so much. She got this ready for us because she knew this was going to be hard, right? But just in case they don't get it, because sometimes they don't get it, you have legacy letters, legacy love letters in there. And the very first, most important, most famous love letter was written by Saint Valentine to be delivered after he died. And look at the impact that made, right?
Wow.
So let's write letters. Let's write Valentines to our families in that legacy binder. So in case they don't realize how much you love them because you put the legacy binder together, you have a documentation that how much you love them, how proud you are of them. And my mother's legacy, before she took her life, she left one little card that just said, all my love, always, mom. It had $5 in it. That was 1/3 of her net worth. She had $15 when she died. That card is so precious to me. It's so precious to me. So you don't have to, I have legacy letters, legacy love letters, apology letters, reconciliation letters, templates written in my book. So you can just fill in the blank. You don't have to be a writer. Just fill it in the blank. So just get it done. And even a card or like a really beautiful card or Valentine, putting it in there with a little note will suffice. But letters, personal letters that say a little bit more, I think are even better. But whatever you can put in there is important.
And you even talk about even leaving a legacy video that people can do that also, right?
Yes, and on your last guest on this podcast talked about how you could do it professionally. So so someone else will do it for you. I am a little challenged technologically. I think many of us baby boomers are. So there are companies that can do this for you. And your last guest was one of those people, Nancy
Leaf, yes.
Nancy Leaf, who could do it for you. And I would recommend doing that, or even before you do that, because you never know, you might get hit by a truck when you walk outside. Even just taking your phone for 5 minutes and just leaving just a quick little note, little bit of information, and then just send it out now so everybody has it. Is helpful. You can write legacy books online. There's all kinds of legacy books you can write with pictures just online, snap on your computer, or just write one out, write the history of your family out. But I think that idea, I'm gonna call Nancy and get one of those legacy videos, because then it will be kind of impressive to the kids, and they'll feel like a mom grandma has a little bit more technologically sound experiences in her background. So
they even have the memory of your voice when you leave the video. They have you and your voice and how you're telling them these things. So I think it's great. And I know you're also have a new online course that you're developing to help people learn to live with their legacy in mind. And we're going to provide a link for that in our show notes. So would you like to tell us anything about that new course that you're creating?
Yes, what I found is many times one of the biggest barriers to people getting this done, because I think we all know we should do it. I mean, we know we need to get this done, but we don't, because first of all, we think we're going to live for longer. We think we have time. And of course, death comes unexpectedly. We don't know. So what I did is, and it's coming out on November 1st, I have a course on this whole subject. So I have a book, and then I have a course, and the course is a step-by-step preparation to get ready. And at the end of the course, you will have a binder put together with all of your important papers that you can lock away, put in a special place, and then get digital backup, because you never know. I mean, it's always nice to get backup this, once you put this together. And it can be done very quickly in about 4 weeks. You can get all this done, have it in your binder. And I put together a digital or an online course for that, because I think people just need a little help not to be.
I agree. I mean, like if you're on your own and you're trying and you're looking at this as an endeavor, it can be very discouraging, but to take a course like that and you're guided, it makes it much easier.
Yes. And I recommend that groups even do it. So like I have a Bible study. When I started, before I wrote my book, I have a Bible study, I also have a book club. Before I wrote my book, I brought this up to the book club and said, okay, guys, let's all get ready. And in fact, on the cover of my book, I have my book club members holding up their little folder, with legacy folder at that time, to just say, I did it. So when you can do it as a group, it's kind of nice to have some accountability, but the course will allow you to do it by yourself, as a couple, or in a group. And when you're done with the course, you have your binder, and you can go on and live your life and not worry about it, except you do have to update it yearly. I would recommend you go back and make sure that you update it.
Sometimes things change in there, right? And are you going to have a special offer for our grief? Are you leaving information about a special offer for our Grief and Rebirth podcast audience?
Yes, you can have a free copy of the 4 tasks to getting that family discussion done. So you can get your discussion with your family, because sometimes people are a little afraid to have that discussion, but they need to know, your family needs to have the discussion about what's going to happen after you die. It's important to have everything done in writing and have that legacy binder, but it's also important to talk about it before you go, so that they understand what's going to happen. One of the biggest causes of conflict is surprise. So you kind of want to make it so they're not surprised, especially if there's something unusual. If you have a blended family, for instance, that's always a little more complicated. If you have a child that maybe might need some extra attention, maybe there's a disability involved. If somebody has helped you for the last 4 or 5 years, has been your nursing care, and you want to leave a little more to that person, you can express it before you die, and then they kind of know what to expect.
That's beautiful. And why do you say that healing is not a passive event? And why is it important for each of us to heal?
Oh, living in that grief pit, it's a terrible place to live. I mean, it's just seething with sorrow, and all hope is destroyed, and every task is overwhelming. When you're in that grief pit, you can't get anything done, because you're just, it's like you're suffocating. I mean, it's just an awful place to live. But I think, in my mind, I would have stayed there if I hadn't been shaken out by that conversation with my husband's. So I want to recommend to everyone that you have to just have courage and fight and kick and claw your way out of that grief pit. Have courage, because living away from fear, because if fear is down there in that pit, you got fear everywhere. Getting away from fear and moving on to joy is a wonderful transition. It's a much better place to live.
It is so true. And I really think healing takes courage. But it takes a lot of courage. But when you face it and when you grow through it, it's beautiful. And you drop so much pain and suffering from you, right? And what is the Kim Harms tip for finding joy in life?
I think grabbing on to something beyond you. If you have a faith, I have a faith, you have a faith. Grabbing on to the fact that this life is going to be extended. What you're doing now is going to be extended. And even if you're someone that doesn't believe there's life after death, because a certain percentage of people don't, living with your legacy in mind, where you're looking at, what legacy am I going to leave? What am I leaving behind? Where you're actually helping people when you're doing that. Right. And what I discovered is, when you do that and you're helping other people, you get the joy right back. I mean, the endorphins are going crazy inside of you as you're helping out somebody else. So the more you help other people, the more joy you feel, the more legacy you leave. And if you feel that this life is just part of a big, eternal life, that is helpful. But even if you don't, it's still important to do that, because you become more joyful while you're here.
Right. And what better thing to leave to your loved ones than joy? What better?
Oh, yes.
My goodness. Kim, I agree with you that we are never the same or normal after a catastrophic loss, that we are changed. As you say, we don't get over it, we get through it, and we move forward. I want to thank you for the important work you're doing that is helping people overcome grief and challenges in their lives, so that they can leave a legacy of joy and resilience to the next generation. And I thank you from my heart for this touching, inspiring, and wisdom-filled interview on Grief and Rebirth podcast today. As I like to say, to be continued. Thank you so much, Kim, and many, many blessings.
Oh, thank you, Irene. This has been fabulous.
Thank you. Mwah.
Well.
Thanks for tuning in to Grief and Rebirth. Remember, you can dive deeper into everything we've discussed by checking out the show notes and all past episodes at ireneweinberg.com. Don't forget to follow us on social media at Irene S. Weinberg on Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, and wherever you love to hang out online. Plus, we're on YouTube, so be sure to subscribe and never miss a video. For those of you listening, you'll find links to my 2 books, Good to the Last Drop and They Serve Bagels in Heaven, in the show notes. And if you're watching on YouTube, you can see those books listed right above, so don't miss out. And here comes a special treat. If you sign up for Audible as a first-time user using my link, which you can find in the show notes, you can get They Serve Bagels in Heaven for free. And finally, people often ask me what I read, what I use, and what I recommend for healing and self-care. So I've carefully curated a compilation of those items to share with you. You can head over to kit.co/grief and rebirth to check them out. Thanks again for tuning in, and until next time, many blessings.